Hello, Stephen and Janet and colleagues. I'm Venkat Pulla from the Australian Catholic University. I teach social work here and I've been in Australia for the last 25 years. I'm originally from India and I have lived in multicultural society in a way in India itself and have traveled a lot, several times to your country, your great country. And at this point of time, my paper, the draft paper, I would say, the whole paper which has been given to you, is around educating students to work with diverse communities. And I use the word reflexive practice. There are a couple of reasons why I chose this particular idea. We are living today, certainly in a multicultural age, where people are no longer staying in the same country from where they have actually where they were born, and many of these countries are having several languages and also facing certainly a number of challenges as a result of different strife, different reasons, particularly the refugee crisis that you see at this point of time looming quite a lot in the European, particularly your region, and also in the rest of the world. I suppose the draft paper that I've circulated to you is pretty lengthy, and it has got certainly a grounded, a very person-oriented, person-centered paper that I've written, and essentially the key points that I wish to raise in this is primarily to see how we can generate amongst the social work and social science students an opportunity for them to reflect and also undertake a reflexive social work practice with culturally and linguistically diverse type of individuals that they would actually see as clients. Now, one of the things that I talk about quite a lot is about cultural empathy and how do we build it up. And I use, of course, a number of, in the classroom setting, I use a lot of videos. I also use a lot of scenarios that I set for them in order that they understand and respond. But to begin with, I have divided my paper into approximately 3 parts. One is about teaching positionality in social work through personal narratives. And when I talk about personal narratives, it is about who you are, where you have come from, what kind of community, and in fact, in my case, it is also the caste, the caste as in caste system in India, from where we come, and where we live at this point of time, what all of these things, my education, my class status and everything else, what is the kind of impact it would have indirectly or directly on the type of orientation and the type of association that I would have with anything that I look at. So that's one of the most important things that I look at. So I consider in all of this self-awareness, critical reflexivity, analytical thinking, which are supposed to be the main crux of our social work, or otherwise they are very integral to social work practice. And how do we ensure that this is something that we can give? There are very clearly differences between me and you, people attending the conference at Landshut, and this is not necessarily a metaphorical difference. There are commonalities too, and the commonalities are that we are all social workers, hopefully, and there could be a few who are from social science field. We all have a desire to create a beautiful world, a world of equality. We all talk about human rights, and we are interested in ensuring that there is definitely a decent deal for the refugees, and they are treated in a very humane way. Then that's the least that we could do for the kind of trauma and for the kind of trail that they have already gone through. I remember in 2014, when I launched to do my grounded theory research around the Lhotshampa refugees, the Bhutanese refugees who went to Nepal. And of course, there was also a time when basically the Bhutanese refugees have been living in Nepal for almost 25 years. And my work is just around their 21st year or probably 20th year for some people who've been living there. So I actually looked at, I made friends with and found communities of refugees in Australia. And they have come from Bhutan to Nepal and to the third country, Australia. And they were settling down in rural areas. So I actually followed their journey as to how they came here and where were they in Nepal, and how many years they actually lived in Nepal. To 23 years, if they have lived in a country like that, in Nepal, and then finally they are sent across to Australia. Some of them are in Norway, and probably some of them are in other parts of Europe, including Finland, I'm sure. And certainly a large amount of them have gone to United States as well. So what was I looking at in this sense? I was looking at the differences in which the kind of the cultural response, the responsiveness that we are supposed to show towards them, work with it, and also at the same time, another terminology that we use is called cultural competence. Now, cultural competence and cultural responsiveness, I make a difference. Competence is something that you go on and on and on, and you become competent. Responsiveness, of course, is the first immediate thing that you try to do, and being very sensitive and ensuring that your sensitivity is continuous, and it provides the necessary amount of impetus in our relationship. So in a way, in this paper, I reflect myself as an Indian-born Australian who has been living here for the last 25 years. I look at my own concepts of what is my reflexivity, what is my positionality, how do I consider that I am privileged, and of course I do give plenty of theoretical references in theoretical and critical theory references around this, so that we understand what we are talking about. In the second part of my paper, I basically deal with what is it that I do with the students, and how do I go about explaining to them, and the kind of tasks that I try to do in social work. So to begin with, I teach what is called a subject called social work practice with culturally and linguistically diverse communities. And I also, of course, teach ethics in social work as far in our country is concerned for the master's degree. So I raise simple questions. How has the knowledge of the world distorted or influenced our perceptions of another individual's reality or the truth? And my premise in setting the above question is to encourage the student to thoughtfully answer in their own understanding and present their own truth, because everybody has their own truth. It is their own call. I don't want to scaffold everything for them. I don't want them to, I don't want them to feel very, very diffident about reaching somebody. I want them to come out openly and share with us what actually happens. For instance, many times they have expressed their own racist fears in dealing with somebody else, and some people have had their inhibitions because I'm from white background, I'm from white class, I'm from white race. So how would the other people react to me? This is one of the questions which my students most of the time raise it. And at the same time, we will have to find ways and means by which they understand how to respond to themselves, and they also need to understand how to show their responsiveness to the others. So I recognize that such positionality is, kind of difficult. It is fraught with many biases and many difficult situations. And one of the things that International Federation of Social Work, I'm much reminded with their definition that social work is a practice-based profession, an academic discipline that promotes social change and development. Now, it is all about the well-being of mankind. If it is so, how could you do that without having ingrained in your work and in your practice the ideas and notions about human rights and human solidarity, and how do you go about doing that? I mean, if you do any social work, it must have that sort of connotation. The other thing that I also the IFSW reminds us about is a profession has an acceptable agenda to work worldwide on social cohesion theme, and its core values are very much social justice, human rights, and about collective responsibility. So if we take these, and of course respect for cultural diversity, how much of respect do we show, and how does that fit into our own social work constructivist agenda is one of the things that I try to talk here. Now, in my university, in the work that I do, it's the Australian social work degree that I teach, which has got a 4-year degree. And the aspirants spent about 3/4 of the time in the first 2 years of the program and undertaking psychology, sociology, and some amount of liberal arts. And the strategy, in my view, allows them to clearly undertake and demonstrate what we call the graduate attributes. That is, if their student has done about 4 years of work, there is an expectation, 3 years of work, there's an expectation that he or she would provide a very strong opportunity to practice ethical decision making. And certainly there are what we call some sort of intended learning outcomes throughout our course. So the profile of my class, I would think about as those who probably do not have, much understanding of the whole world today, because I think I do not wish to make generalizations, but by and large there are students who are, pretty much glued into, they already know what they are doing. They want to come into human rights, they want to go into social work, into disabilities, or they want to go into mental health. Some already oriented, they're already oriented. But there are many who just come into social work because they see that as a vocation, they see that as an opportunity for them to understand a little bit about society and move on. And fair enough, we do need people who are, well, probably sometimes it's important for us to see what's the commonality. Do they all have compassion as a value? Do they all have some passion to do something in the society? If a couple of these things are more or less found, and that's the kind of material that's educable, and you can go on doing something with them in such a way that you can put a whole lot of opportunities in front of them, and they could take a couple of them and move on. So I found that basically assisting graduates, social work students, we tend to look at, okay, can they work around the common good of our society? Can they think critically, and can they take up some clearly ethical decision in their focus? So I try to show that both at the institutional level and at the class level, what happens with our students. And I've also tried to show in this paper a kind of a marrying between social work pedagogy and that of the overarching learning or the teaching, learning and teaching styles that we kind of are expected to adopt. So what I have done, what actually happens is when the student comes in the first 2 weeks, we ask probably the students to talk more about me and my community. Now, me and my community can be interpreted in different ways. It is the suburb, it's where you live, and we try to ask these, the students to identify possibly a number of people that they can identify, and then we try and say, well, if you did guesswork as to who they could be, could you then look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics for your suburb and see what are the various communities that are basically available. There could be Hindus, there could be Muslims, there could be, there could be Burmese people, there could be, apart from religion, I'm talking in terms of migrants, there could be Greek people, there could be Italian people, and there could be some percentages, and you'll be shocked to know that some of them don't know that so many other communities actually exist, because the way we are at this point of time seems to be we are a bit more lost in our neighborhoods. In other words, lost in the neighborhoods means, the neighbor is around, but we don't know he exists. We don't know there's many other lives in that particular immediate next door house. We probably might say there could be 3 people, there could be 4 people, or there's a dog, there's a cat, and that's about all. So this is the kind of orientation we give to understand what they feel, what they can see, and then we ask them, we understand, we want them to write a short reflection about who they are. Many of them write, many of them are very apologetic in their writing. They try to write, I don't have any culture. I'm a mainstream Australian. I don't think there's anything that I can be writing about. It's whereas there are other students who probably might say that, look, my grandfather was German, my mother was something else, and my grandfather was something else, and we've got a mixed of 4 or 5 other religions in our community, in our family. I'm not religious, something or the other. They are able to reflect. So what we tend to do is we start beginning with that bit as to who you are. Then we want to know who the other person is. And, this is the disclosable you that is important for you. It is important for me too to know what is it that you are made of. And of course, with permissible generalizations, you will also talk about the rest of the community. So then, of course, we move on to more critical parts through assignments, through essays, and my paper basically tries to essentially deal with how I assist the students, how I scaffold the information to them in such a way that they become not only responsive but also become competent in dealing with some of these issues. One of the most important, crucial things that I want to say here is, in the beginning, I have always found when cultural diversity is a subject that I want the students to come into, there's some kind of a fear. There is some kind of an inhibition. And all I do in those 13 interactions is that inhibition, that fear is removed. Sorry for that. And that is removed through only one process, that is, ask a question. They will tell you what their culture is about. People are ready to share information. All you need to do is go ahead and ask them. Once you know what information you manage to get, then you can relate to that and then talk about it. I hope this little introduction will help you and also the entire draft paper. I look forward for plenty of comments from you. I'm not sure whether this was something that you are looking forward to. It would have been wonderful for me to be there. I would have shared a lot more things, but then it's all about resources, and God bless you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.